The Hereward Way, 110 miles from Oakham to Harling Road in May 2003. The Hereward Way derives its name from the English nobleman Hereward the Wake, who opposed the Norman rule and held the Isle of Ely against a Norman siege for 8 years. When the Normans finally took his stronghold in 1071, Hereward and his men vanished mysteriously into the marshes and disappeared from the pages of history. The sketchy records about Hereward's life are probably based on legends and are the subject of considerable conjecture. It has even been suggested that he might have been the Fenland Robin Hood. The Hereward Way runs for 110 miles across the land that Hereward knew, starting in the market town of Oakham, just to the west of Rutland Water, and ending at Harling Road Station, just to the east of Thetford. Linking the Viking Way and the Peddar's Way, it passes from the rolling landscape of Rutland, with its charming villages and rosy limestone cottages, into the Nene Valley, and across the Cambridgeshire Fens and the Brecklands of Norfolk. Today's Fenland landscape is very different to that which Hereward would have known, but it is still captivating with its big skies, beautiful sunsets, and bucolic nature. My account of the Aldrich Causeway in Hikes on Dykes provides further information about one of Hereward's successes in routing William the Conqueror's army. Other videos which provide more information about the Fens are the Ouse Valley Way, the Rothschild Way, the Fen Rivers Way, and the Pathfinder Way. When I embarked on this walk, I was very excited to once again be journeying through the Fenlands, for which, contrary to expectations, I have developed a great love. This was a delightful but surprisingly challenging, relatively local walk, because it was poorly signposted, often overgrown, and there are no hills. Day 1, Oakham to Stamford, 20.8 miles. This was my first long-distance walk of 2023. What better way to kick off the walking year? Start of the Hereward Way, outside the grain store near the railway station in Oakham. I had only walked a few steps, and those ever-absent otters started to mock me again. Will I ever see one in the wild? The Buttercross in Oakham, traditionally used for selling dairy products and possibly also as a preaching cross. Inside details of the roof of the Buttercross. Oakham Castle. Some of the 230 plus horseshoes from royalty and peers which adorn the interior castle walls. According to ancient tradition, peers were required to present a horseshoe to the lord of the manor on their first visit to the town. A profusion of dandelions just outside Oakham as I got stuck into my walk. Dandelions have tonic, laxative and diuretic properties. The trail runs along the northern shore of Rutland Water, the largest reservoir in England in terms of surface area. The bluebell woods along the northern shore of Rutland Water were gorgeous, and I saw lots of interesting bird life, including a goldcrest. The Hereward and Viking Ways run together for 7 miles into Oakham. Health and safety gone mad? Beautiful clematis in Empingham. I I walked through lots of beautiful Lincolnshire villages, almost Cotswoldy. This is in Empingham. Empingham. I had to do a detour here. The bridge and church in Ketton. Arriving in Stamford along the River Welland, very cold and wet because after a beautiful day the heavens suddenly opened during my last mile into Stamford. Fortunately, I had plenty of gear with me in my rucksack and I managed to stay relatively dry. I then had a nightmare journey home as several of the trains I was going to take back to my car in St Neots were cancelled, and then the A428, my route back from St Neots, was closed. I finally arrived home at 10 o'clock in the evening. Not what you need after a 20-mile day. But I did meet a lot of interesting people on my mini adventure. Day 2. 20 glorious miles from Stamford to Peterborough. En route I heard a cuckoo, saw a few hares, rescued a kitty in distress and danced through a violent thunderstorm. I left Stamford in beautiful weather and passed by the entrance of Burley House on my way out. Ivy-leaved toadflax growing on the walls round Burley Park. Ivy-leaved toadflax is edible but slightly bitter. It has antiscorbutic and vulnerary properties. Beautiful Cornus florida, a type of flowering dogwood. We're still in Burley Park. I'm actually on Ermine Street now. It's this raised bank here, a major road in Roman times. This is part of the old Roman road, Ermine Street, which runs east from Stamford for about 3.5 miles. I felt like I was walking along the vellum of Hadrian's Wall. This is the dear little kitty which I rescued near the Sacrewell Heritage Farm and Country Centre. I heard desperate meowing coming from a hedge as I was about half a mile away from the centre, and I found it up the top of a tree in the hedge. I enlisted the help of a girl who works at the centre, who just happened to be passing by in a farm vehicle. After exercising my tree climbing skills, we eventually managed to get it down, and the girl promised she would take care of it and find out where it had come from. After 5 miles, the trail descends to the River Nene and follows it all the way to Peterborough. Greedy tree. Delightful walking along the banks of the River Nene. The River Nene by Wansford Station, the start and end terminus of the Nene Valley Heritage Railway. The Nene Valley Railway, a blast from the past. Just to the west of Peterborough, the trail wends its way round the western, northern and eastern edges of the Ferry Meadows Country Park. This is the ferry bridge at Gunwade Ferry. Wooden sculpture along the banks of the River Nene, Ferry Meadows. Beautiful sycamore flowers. The trail runs along a boardwalk on the western edge of the park and passes through seas of wild garlic. After walking through prime otter territory all day, 21 miles of it, there was not a snout to be seen of the elusive otter. I met a couple on the bridge where otters were famously supposed to hang out, and they gleefully told me that they had seen an otter there just a few days ago. But those pesky blighters must have known I was coming, 'cause once again they were conspicuous by their absence. Underpass just outside Peterborough. Just after this, the heavens opened. Massive thunder and lightning, and torrential rain and hail. I was very glad I had my rain gear with me this time. Almost in the centre of Peterborough here. The trail somehow manages to avoid the urban sprawl, and you have no concept that you are walking through a large city. Day 3, Peterborough to Whittlesea via Flag Fen, 10 miles. Despite the grim weather and the potentially grim urban sprawl of Peterborough, this was a lovely 10-mile trot, especially after I left Peterborough behind and headed out into the fens along the River Nene. The River Nene as it flows through the centre of Peterborough. Leaving Peterborough behind and heading out into the fens along the River Nene. Flag Fen, reputed to be the finest Bronze Age archaeological site in Northern Europe. This is a 1-mile detour off the trail, but well worth visiting. Part of the Flag Fen site, which is located in the midst of a unique Bronze Age landscape that has revealed a mysterious timber causeway and platform made by people 3,500 years ago. It was discovered in 1971 when excavations for a new town revealed an almost intact ancient landscape which ran along the edge of the drained fen. A roundhouse, constructed in 2022, based on an Iron Age roundhouse that was discovered at nearby Cat's Water in the 1980s. A section of the excavated timber causeway on display in the preservation hall. I was almost knocked off my feet when I visited it and felt a strong ley line running along the path of the causeway. The River Nene near Flag Fen. One of Whittlesea's mud walls. These walls are a special local feature which were created when the brick tax was introduced in 1784 to help to pay for the ongoing wars against the American colonies. They use clay subsoil which overlays the famous brick clay of the area, and their construction is similar to the cob or witchet walls found elsewhere in England. Day 4, Whittlesea to March, 12 miles. Narrow Boat and Swan's Nest, just before Angle Corner Bridge, at the crossing point of Bevil's Leam and the 20-foot river. Heartsease or Wild Pansy on the trail just before Angle Bridge. Heartsease has been used traditionally for speeding up the metabolism, soothing sore throats, reducing whooping cough symptoms, and treating constipation, cystitis, and skin complaints. The Old River Nene, just 3 miles to the west of March. The owners of this narrowboat are able to access the entire canal network via the Northampton arm of the Grand Union Canal from their riverside home here, which was idyllic. They told me that they had seen otters in the river. Obviously, I didn't see any on my way past. The Old River Nene in the centre of March. As I entered March, I walked for a mile along West End with its charming old riverside properties of various styles, some Dutch and some constructed with Queen Anne bricks. Day 5, March to Welney, 12 miles. This was possibly one of the most boring stages I have ever walked. It was hard work. There was a strong headwind and a lot of tall grass which I was forced to wade through along the way. the double hammer beam angel roof built in 1523 of St Wendrida's Church in March. There are 120 carved angels depicting martyrs and saints, with the lowest tier holding musical instruments. Among all these there is a spoiler, a possible green man on one of the triangular spandrels. The whole roof is decorated with 2,700 fleurs-de-lis. Saint Wendrida was an Anglo-Saxon woman who lived in March in the 7th century and whose shrine became a place of pilgrimage in the late Middle Ages. Crossing the 16-foot drain just before Christchurch. Modern Vision Furrow? A potato field near Tip's End, just before Welney. The Lamb and Flag Inn in Welney. The 100-foot Washes, Old Bedford River at Welney. Day 6, Welney to Ely, 12 miles. In order to walk this stage, I parked my car in Ely and took a taxi out to Welney, and then walked back to Ely. I think I provided my taxi driver with considerable entertainment because he was new to the area and on the third day of his new job. He had never been out into the fens before, let alone Welney, and he had trouble understanding why on earth someone would want to walk such a long distance and through such an isolated, seemingly desolate landscape. I got the impression that shuffling from the sofa to the fridge and back again amounted to the highest mileage that he was capable of. I then gave him an educated lesson on the joys and benefits of walking, but I could see the disbelief shining through his eyes. When I got out of his taxi in the wilds of Welney, he was still shaking his head in disbelief and seemed to be genuinely worried about leaving me there alone at the mercy of the fens. Flag irises along the 100-foot washes. Flag irises are believed to have numerous medicinal properties, including anti-inflammatory, analgesic, antioxidant, and antimicrobial properties. However, some parts of the plant are toxic and should be avoided. As I was pounding along the almost endless road which runs along the New Bedford River, the 100-foot drain, I crossed paths and had a great chat with Jim, who was on day 8 of his 900-mile trek across Britain in aid of the MS Trust. He told me that his walk, which would take him 64 days, started at the most easterly point of Britain, Lowestoft-Ness, and would end at the most westerly point, the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, taking in the lowest point, Home Fen, and the highest point, Ben Nevis, en route. Hemlock was rife along many of the trails I walked through the fens. Here are some good examples of this highly poisonous plant with their characteristic brown and purple mottled stems, growing near Gravelhead Bridge. Hemlock is one of the deadliest plants in the UK. There is no antidote, and identification is key for foragers because it can easily be mistaken for other umbellifers such as cow parsley and wild carrot. Hemlock was the plant that famously killed Socrates. Only in the suburbs of Ely. Oliver Cromwell's house, Ely. Ely Cathedral. The River Great Ouse at Ely. Day 7, Ely to Lakenheath Station, 18 miles. I heard the cuckoo as I was crossing Cuckoo Bridge just outside Ely. This is the view from the bridge at the Roswell Pits. As I walked into Prick Willow, I was highly amused by the number plate on this little lorry, which empties portaloos. The Prick Willow village sign. The Sedge Fen Way station on the Via Beata, a 400-mile pilgrimage trail incorporating Christian artworks and sanctuaries, which runs across Britain from east to west at its widest point, from St David's Head in Wales to Lowestoft in England. Way stations have been established every 10 miles or so along its course. The idea is that the artworks will communicate the Christian gospel, enabling people to stop and meditate on them as part of their pilgrimage. So I'm actually on day 7 of my Hereward Way, which is about an 18-mile walk. I think I've probably done about 17 miles so far, and I've got 3 left. And this is the Lake and Heath Nature Reserve, and it's just beautiful here. It's so peaceful. There's cuckoos and swifts, and I've seen roe deer and they've barked at me, and it's just me and all this beautiful, beautiful, pristine fen. It's just quite primeval, and I haven't seen a soul on my walk all day, and especially as I come into the nature reserve. Ooh, there's a heron over there. I'm seeing all sorts of birds and wildlife. I've seen hares. It's just beautiful here. It's so peaceful. Day 8, Lake and Heath Station to Thetford, 18 miles. Narrow-leaved plantain as I approach the Brecklands. Narrow-leaved plantain is edible and has been used for treating minor wounds and skin irritations, as well as for respiratory and digestive problems. Donkeys on the outskirts of Brandon. Entering Thetford Forest just after Brandon. The church in the woods at Santon Downham. Crossing the Little Ouse. Mysterious medieval earthworks and lost village at Santon. Santon Church. Comfrey growing along the Little Ouse just before Thetford. Comfrey is a wonderful remedy for bruises and broken bones. The ruins of Thetford Priory, founded in the early 12th century. Day 9, Thetford to Harland Road Station, 12 miles. The Norfolk Devil's Punch Bowl, Norfolk's most mysterious landmark. People used to think that the devil was responsible for the random filling of this crater with water, which seemed to be unrelated to rainfall. It is actually a so-called fluctuating mere. Norfolk has several of these. They were formed when subsurface chalk slowly eroded to form an underground chasm and eventually a sinkhole called a doline. The water level represents a rare surface exposure of the usually hidden subsurface aquifer or water table. Typical scenery on Croxton Heath. I walked for miles along straight tracks through forest like this, getting a good dose of forest bathing. Ponies on Croxton Heath. Langmere, one of many meres along my route through the Brecklands. Deja vu. The Hereward Way joins the Pedder's Way for just over half a mile, and just 4 miles before the end of the Hereward Way. I came across another Via Beata way station in Roundham Woods. The carving was designed by Cathy Stables, and the birds were carved and painted by girls from the Norwich Step Project, which seeks to help and support women who have suffered abuse. Jesus' parable about the mustard seed illustrates how God's creative power causes great and unexpected things to grow from very small beginnings. The remains of St Andrew's Church, Roundham, destroyed by an accidental fire in 1736. The charming gatehouse to Roundham Hall. The end of the Hereward Way at Harling Road Station. This is a bit of an anticlimax really, because there is nothing there to mark the end of the trail. No crowds to welcome me, no coffee, nothing except this rather dilapidated station where hardly any trains stop. I can't help but feel that it would have been better for the end or beginning to be on Nettershall Heath, where the Pedder's Way and the Angles Way both begin or end. Lessons learnt. The Hereward Way is poorly signposted throughout, although slightly better during the middle section around Peterborough. Flat walking over long distances is always tough on the feet and legs, but I survived relatively unscathed. My flat walking experiences on the Thames Pass the previous year had prepared me for walking this trail,